So I don't even know what we're going to call this, but maybe if you just introduce yourself, who you are.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Arvin Bisbal, I'm from Workplace Partners. I'm a workplace relations specialist and I advise and protect small business employers.
And how long have you been doing it for?
I've been doing this now for about, in the business alone, 10 years, but outside of that, in total, working for other companies too, about 20 years.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And never seen anything like we're seeing this week?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
No, we've been through a GFC, but this is nothing.
Were you around in a similar environment with the GFC?
Actually, no. I was working in a larger organisation, so they could actually take quite a bit of that force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do the two? I've seen a few people talk about the relationship between them, but friends of mine that are in the stock market said this is unprecedented in their working life, even with the GFC.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's pretty new for us, but we've just in the last few days we've had quite a few clients. Marketing budgets just stop overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's in panic stations, and everyone's action, I think, at the moment is just to pull all expenses as much as they can. So I think one of the things that we'll get into as well is talking about employees, redundancies, leave entitlements, things like that for employers that are going to be asked the question by probably some of their employees.
Yes.
And don't I heard the EXCLUDE mayor speaking the other morning on ABC, but he was quite vague about details and talking very much like a politician. So, I think there is quite a bit of uncertainty out there. And
absolutely. I don't think anyone can give us a straight answer at this point.
No. And they might not know the answer.
Look, the most important thing that small or mid-sized business employers should do if they don't have a HR manager already is communicate. They should probably head off to proper authoritative sources such as the Department of Health or the World Health Organization and educate themselves on, what steps they should be taking in the workplace in terms of safety and hygiene to protect their workers and also to protect their clients. It's twofold. A business, I guess, needs to look at the safety of its workers and also how to survive.
Yes.
So the first step I would say is educate yourself, go to the Department of Health, go to World Health Organization, get yourself some information and then put in place those hygiene practices in your workplace to best protect your workers. Yeah.
Okay. And so do you think the role of HR within organisations that have them is changing as well? Or because this would be new to them too, wouldn't it?
Oh, look, it's new to everyone.
Right.
I don't think anyone is ready for it, unless, of course, they could predict the future somehow.
Yeah.
But in terms of HR, I just spoke to a HR manager in Sydney this morning, and they've got their whole team bogged down on that issue. And so you've got these other HR issues to deal with, but that's just, put it on the side. We've got to figure out how to communicate with our teams, especially when you've got 300, 400, 500 employees and you're trying to figure out how do I communicate with everyone that's actually working remotely.
Yeah.
So it's it all comes down to communication and making sure you've got the systems to communicate with people working from home too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I heard the New York Times yesterday. I was listening to a podcast where they actually got hold of some key medical professionals who have been working in Italy at the coldface for the last few weeks.
Right.
Yeah, some of the stories that he was talking about, it was were horrible to listen to. But his advice was to learn from their mistakes, and obviously isolation is a big part of trying to slow down the curve.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But there's a huge amount of implications for those sort of comments that we have to deal with daily and take ourselves out of the equation. What are some of the things that you think small business are going to really struggle with over the next few months?
I think the biggest thing that they're going to struggle with is generating revenue.
Yeah.
Everyone's in this stage where things are unpredictable.
Yeah.
People are not probably spending as much, or they're spending on only essential items.
Yes.
So most businesses, I guess, are starting to see a decline. I mean, I've had just this week alone, quite a few of my clients calling and saying we need to start looking at redundancies. Well, what are the steps for redundancies? So it's a huge impact financially for businesses, and they've got to just look at how do we survive, essentially.
What are some of the options with, say, redundancies for small business in the landscape at the moment? Because is there any scope for that to change, or do you think that the how redundancies work at the moment is how they're going to work for the coronavirus? So
yeah, look, I think it's unlikely that Fair Work is going to move to change the Fair Work legislation, Fair Work Act around redundancies and payments for redundancies and the steps that you need to take under modern awards or your enterprise agreement. But there are I guess, processes in place where if a business can't afford to pay redundancy, they can make certain applications to the Fair Work Commission. I won't go into that in detail here. Okay. But if they use that fallback, it's not instant, and the Fair Work Commission might probably be flooded with, those sort of applications. So just got to be conscious of that too. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a difficult one.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, you got employees that are fearful of coming into work,
yes,
whether it's a genuine fear or not, because there's a lot out there in the media, so you don't know what the employees are actually feeding themselves in terms of the information around the virus. But I would strongly recommend that the businesses follow the guidelines of Department of Health.
Yes,
and at the moment it's that the employee has to self-isolate if they've returned from an overseas trip for up to 14 days. If they do rock up to work, send them home, definitely. And also report it to the authorities because they've put everyone else in the workplace at risk. So the employer's got to... That's a good question. I know that they can issue fines, and I believe SafePol can actually do spot checks. So I'm assuming so they come under that authority, because that's the media's just saying the authorities. And which authorities? The other thing too is, they've put the rest of your team at risk. It's pretty selfish act, if you ask me. So if you've put anyone else at potential risk, then the employer needs to make sure that they've communicated it to the other staff without, I guess, in any way discriminating or, I guess, impinging on the privacy of that person. So you want to be careful about how you do it. You might simply say, look, someone in the workforce, if you're small, I think everyone's going to know who it is. But if you've got a good size and you say someone, so therefore if you develop symptoms, please make sure you see your doctor. I think that's very important. So
just educating.
Exactly.
Communicating with staff.
And the other thing too is, if a family member of the employee has been diagnosed and then the same household, then that employee needs to self-isolate too. So check all the requirements with the Department of Health. And that's the best way to go in terms of what you should be doing within the workplace, who can enter and who shouldn't be entering into your workplace. Look, I think the first thing to do is to speak to the employee and genuinely get a grasp of what the fear is. If it's simply a fear that, if I walk out of my house, I might get this infection, and not just because the workplace is not safe or because the employer hasn't put in safety practices, then it's probably unreasonable for the employee to then also continue to expect to be paid for not showing up to work. So the employer might want to take steps then to deal with that employee, whether it's a disciplinary action or whether it's simply, look, everyone's scared. I'm just going to let you stay at home on unpaid leave because I can't afford for you to stay at home on paid leave. Not paid leave, sorry, to pay you for doing nothing, essentially. I guess, if your employee's not coming in, then you need to determine why. And if it's a case that they've pointed out, certain safety protocols within the business that's not being followed, or then the employer needs to take steps to decide how to fix that. Make those changes and then invite the employee to return back to work. Another
question actually came up yesterday with my hairdresser. She was saying that they have had quite a few cancellations, but they're still busy. But if it gets to a point where they are unable to work and they're forced to go home, what leave would that start to come out of?
So by negotiation, the employer and employee by agreement, the employer and employee can take any accrued annual leave or long service leave that the employee might have. If there's no leave, then it's probably unpaid leave. The other thing too is that if the employee cannot be usefully employed because of the situation being out of the employer's control, then the employer could also look at standing down the employee, but any employer that stands down employees should probably seek advice before they do that.
Is the only way forward for, in that case, redundancy?
No, so if you stand down an employee, they're still your employee. It's just that they're not actually getting paid. Whereas if you do a redundancy, then you're cutting off the ties in that employment relationship.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so there's two different options.
Yeah.
Actually, there's multiple options. One of them could even be a temporary variation to the role. Let's say someone's full-time, to by agreement vary it to a part-time arrangement. And you can work from home on a part-time basis doing XYZ duties. So phone, email, or we can even get on Zoom or Skype, whatever suits the situation best, because sometimes it's not as easy as doing a phone call or an email. You actually need to take time to understand the situation. So we might go through on Zoom or Skype to have a longer conversation.
And then how does it work ongoing? Because I know for a lot of small businesses, HR isn't something that they generally have access to or the ability to even contact.
Mm-hmm.
What would a relationship with you look like ongoing? Is it a retainer based, or is it just a call on when you need? Or
so we have two different options, I guess. One is if you're just calling in for quick advice, then we'll just charge you our time for that period. If you want ongoing HR support and someone in the background, essentially, so when you need any answers, you need some documents, etc., then you would just contact us, and it's a monthly fee that you pay to keep us on for about 12 months. So if an employee is tested positive for the virus and then self-isolation or they can't work, they can access all their leave entitlements. So annual leave, and long service leave, sick leave even, and the important thing to note is sick leave is generally only payable if someone is sick or if you're caring for someone who's sick. So if you're in self-isolation, technically you're not sick.
Right.
So that's where, so we get technical here. You would access annual leave or long service leave by agreement. But generally it's not sick leave or carers leave. So if that's the case and they actually have been tested positive, or doctor confirms that they're sick, then yes, you would pay out your personal carers leave.
Is if the employee agrees, is sick leave able to be utilised during that time, or is that would generally be called something else? Would be
again, we're in unprecedented situations. I think if the employer wants to make it available to the employee, given the situation, or let's just say if school decides to shut down and parents have got to stay at home to take care of their kids, then you would want to give them access to that, because technically that's carers leave. You can't force an employee to get tested, because the Department of Health has stated that they're only actually doing it under certain circumstances. So you can't force an employee to get tested. You can tell the employee that you'd like them to go to a doctor and get a medical clearance, perhaps. But you can't. You can't force the employee to go
actually
and get tested. That's right.
If an employer is worried about, say, someone has gone overseas and they have self-isolated for 2 weeks, but they're still concerned, is there anything they can do to, I guess, stop the threat? Or because they've obviously got to worry about everyone else in the office.
Correct,
is there anything they can do, or is that just a conversation that they have to have one-on-one?
Look, I would definitely say have a conversation with the employee. If the employee says, look, yes, I'm not feeling well, or I've got the sniffles or something like that, then you might encourage the employee to stay home and take their personal or sick leave. However, once they've passed that 14 days, they've met the mandatory self-isolation requirement. If the employer says, I don't want you to come into work, and the employee is actually ready, willing and able to attend work, then the employee is entitled to continue to be paid while they're sitting at home. All right, so employers want to be cautious about doing something that's not under the Department of Health requirements.
So can you make them work from home?
Yes, so you can organise work from home arrangements. Not all roles are suited to it. But if the employee you believe is capable of working from home, make sure you have you're clearly communicating your guidelines. Your work hours are 9 to 5.
Okay.
So if I call you at 3 o'clock, I need you to answer the phone. So we've had employers where I had one call this morning actually and say, I've called my employee 3 times and they're not answering the phone. They're supposed to be working from home. So you want to make sure that your guidelines are very clear before you send someone off to work from home, and you don't have a policy around it. So if you can develop a quick policy around it, or if you need a quick policy, then you give me a call. And we can provide those policies, say, okay, if you work from home, this is how it's going to actually work. I guess it's important not just to go ahead and panic and just go redundancies across the board, because if it only lasts a month, you've lost all your good employees. So you've got to be careful and strategic about how you're doing it and quite intentional about it. You look at who your essential staff are, that you need to keep surviving, with other employees if possible, whether there's alternate work for them or even reduce work by agreement. Like I said earlier, someone's working full time, whether you can still offer 15 hours a week. So it's temporarily modified for that purpose. And then when everything bounces back, then at least you've still got your workforce that you've invested in and trained and not lost all that talent. So I guess redundancies may be essential. Just be careful about how you do it, because when things bounce back and you haven't got a plan on, getting ready for the bounce back, then you might see yourself in a predicament. So I have had a few employers inquire about whether they can do that. Yes, you can, if you're paying well above the minimum award requirements. So you just got to be careful if you're reducing it, that you're not reducing it below their minimum entitlement. So, if someone's on 80K and really realistically the minimum wage under the award for them is 45, you've got some buffer room there to move with. But if they're on the base award wage and you try to reduce it even more, then you're looking at underpayment claims, so don't go there. Instead, look at changing, I guess the hours of work by agreement. Again, you can change a lot of things contractually by agreement.
Just around if things are obviously bad at the moment, if employers ask the employees to engage in reduced salaries or casual, is there any scope to give them some sort of trust that when things do improve, that the employers aren't using it as a get-out-of-jail-free card?
Absolutely. So when you do vary an employee's terms of engagement, you want to make sure that it's in writing. Right, because you don't want to be a situation where you end up in he said, she said, and the employee's claiming that the employer told me X, Y, Z, the employer saying, no, I didn't, and then you just end up in a battle. So if you put everything in writing up front and the employee signs in, the employer signs off on the variation, then it's pretty straightforward. And within that variation agreement, you would essentially say, this agreement will last from this period to this period. Absolutely. And I think this is where it's very important for employers. Your employees are going to look at you as the leaders in the business. And so as a leader, you've got to lead with some confidence and the facts behind you. So like I mentioned right at the beginning, go to the Department of Health, go to the World Health Organization website, educate yourself on what the risks are and what steps you need to take in terms of hygiene in the workplace. And then communicate that to the employees. I mean, there's even posters that you can download. So you can post this up in your employee common area or your staff lunchroom, etc. The most important thing is that you've got to lead with confidence and you've got to give your employees some kind of assurance, because they're afraid that one, there's a risk to their safety, and two, they don't know what's happening with their jobs. So if an employer can't give some kind of, hey, this is what we're doing and we're doing our best to protect you and the business, then you're going to end up with employees just, all over the shop essentially, getting information wherever they can, and they end up in this fear situation. So you need to demystify the fear, basically. If people want to get in contact with me, then phone's good, email's good too. If they just email support@workplacepartners.com.au.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming in.